Hi, welcome. So excited to be here today to talk with you about your booth interview. I don't think that you have received any interview invites yet. So as you wait, this is a great time to get yourself mentally ready and also know what to expect once the interview invites come out. For those of you who do not know me, I am Susan Berishai, founder of C Admissions. We are a boutique admission coaching firm focused on helping applicants go through the MBA journey from beginning until the end of the process. We do have a very comprehensive approach to our coaching guide, and I'm really excited today to share close to a decade of experience helping applicants go through the booth interview and share some insights that can be helpful for you as you prepare. I have, as you can see here on the computer, I have a few slides that I would love to go through, and then we're going to have Q&A here in this live. After that, just so you know, today's session is slightly a little bit different than your other sessions in the sense that our mock interviews that I encourage all of you to join. Our mock interviews will take place at 1:15 Eastern time. So maybe you can convert that to Pacific time because, I'm not very good at math. So let's talk about what I'm going to cover in today's session. We're going to go through the booth interviews, some do's and don'ts, common interview questions, and how you're going to think through them in terms of your preparation process, and then Q&A. We will be monitoring the Q&A session, so write your questions in the chat. This way, once I'm done with the presentation, we can go through some of those questions and definitely join the mock interviews afterwards, even if you are just seeing how others respond, so you can learn really live what does a really strong interview response look like. Excellent. So let's dive right in. So when you get your interview invite, you will have two parts. The first part is your one-on-one interview. So you book that based on the schedule that Booth offers. And then the second part is the video. I'm going to start first with the video so we can get that out of the way and then talk about the one-on-one interview. So the video component, you will have essentially 2 weeks to submit. You have to submit a 60-second video in response to one of the two questions on the screen. So the first question is, tell us about something new you learned recently that shifted your worldview. How did it influence your behavior and or action? And the second question is, what is something you wish people knew about you, but you're not sure that they do? Make sure that when you are responding to this question, and the beauty of this is it's not a ad lib response, so you should actually prepare, reflect first and foremost on the question and communicate something that you would first and foremost choose the question that most resonates with you, and then communicate what you have not been able to share in your application about yourself. It should not be a repetition of what you already wrote in your application that got you the interview. This is really an opportunity for you to show additional details to the admission team that will resonate with them on a human level before they make their final call. You do have to submit this video within 2 weeks of your interview invite. So there is actually a deadline and you don't want to miss that part. Once you are, let me just spend just a few seconds talking about each one of the questions. The question that asks, tell us about something new you learned recently that shifted your worldview. This question, you should think about essentially some new exposure that you've had that you are not typically exposed to. Perhaps someone gave you new perspectives to think about when you were solving a problem. It could be on your personal experiences. Although when you bring personal, make sure that the influence of your behavior is going towards your professional space, because that's where mostly the business schools are looking for, professional or extracurricular. And it could be that something new that you've learned, it's in your extracurricular engagement. So definitely integrate that in here. There is definitely no right or wrong, but it shouldn't be something new that you learned shouldn't be table stakes shouldn't be elementary in terms of what you include. If you choose to go with the question, what is something you wish people knew about you, but you're not sure that they do? Think from the perspective of, when people first meet you, what is the perception that they have about you? And, how can you shift that perspective, right? So sometimes people may see you as, guarded, but maybe you're really warm, and you can talk about that in your response. Obviously, this is not a only approach it this way, because obviously if everyone approaches it the same way, all the responses are going to be the same for the admission team. So this is not going to add a lot of value to your application, but do reflect on what makes you unique, that you wish people knew about you in the second option, if you choose to go with that route. Any questions that you have about the video, please write them in the comment section or chat section of this. Sorry, actually, I'm not sure. Q&A or chat. Maybe, Selby, you can guide on the chat where they need to write their questions down. Okay, let's continue with the one-on-one component. So you will receive, once you are invited to interview, you will receive essential information about booking your interview. Interviews are conducted either by second-year students or alumni in most situations. The interview booth actually interviews to admit, which means they're looking for ways to say yes to you. The interview is very conversational and it's blind, which means, blind interview, all of that means is that they don't have the rest of your application. All they have is your resume in front of them when they're conducting the interview. Now, that doesn't mean that your that the interviewer has not read the resume. So please go in with the expectation that the interviewer that is interviewing you has prepared for the interview, which means they have read the resume in advance of your actual interview. In terms of how they're evaluating candidates, they are looking for intellectual curiosity. Booth is a quantitatively heavy school. It's a research institution, if you look at University of Chicago, and intellectual curiosity is really important to Booth. You have to demonstrate that. Obviously, you have demonstrated that in your application if you're invited to interview, but you have to do so even in your one-on-one interview. They're also looking for leadership potential. Can you lead others? All of my clients that have booth managers always talk about how their booth supervisors are individuals who are always looking to help them grow in their professional career and asking them questions around where they're going, what they want to do, and how can they support them in that regard. Those are leadership characteristics that are, to be frank, quite unique to the Boothy alumni group. So I would look at how you embody that and showcase that you have the potential to be that leader that embodies this personality. Teamwork, obviously, this is, I think, table stakes for all business schools. They're looking for individuals who can work really well in a team. Booth is no different here. And then, of course, that cultural fit is really, really important to Booth. All right. Perfect. So let's continue. In terms of preparation, I know that you have all obviously done your research before you submitted your application and know why you have chosen to apply to Booth. Given that the applications were due at the beginning of January, we are already in February. You probably may not necessarily always remember what the nuances of why you chose to apply. So I encourage everyone to re-review your booth, the booth offerings that resonated with you when you submitted your application. So Booth has a question that asks you why Booth, essentially. So reread your essay as to the reasons why you have given Booth, like your application to review to be considered for that program. Also, look at obviously what their academics are, but also extracurriculars, hands-on learning opportunities. What are the offerings that they provide to you that makes it stand out? The question that we're going to cover just in a little bit will ask you why Booth, and you need to have concrete examples as to why you have chosen this particular school. If you go in general, you are, an M7, you're a top ranked school, none of that matters. I'm going to be very blunt here. They know where they stand in the rankings. You should focus on really communicating why have you chosen Booth specifically, what it offers. This is essentially an opportunity for you to move in the direction of the career that you want. So show them how Booth is going to offer you that. And you need to revisit your application, reconnect with students, alumni, and the individuals that you have spoken with during the application process to reignite those conversations and ask them even for support in this process. You do want to demonstrate that you have a very clear understanding of what Booth is going to offer you in order to get to your career goals. Booth is very focused on the why, and they want to know that you have asked those deep questions of yourself as to why you have chosen Booth, and that only comes with specific details. They are looking for individuals in terms of how you stand out. You want to showcase that you are self-aware. So where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses? It's really, really important. And weaknesses, I don't mean by, I'm really bad at math, right? What I mean is, where are the areas that you want to develop that Booth can offer you an opportunity for you to develop? You also want to showcase that you have a collaborative mindset. This means that you want to make sure that the examples that you're including, and I always say one question equals to one example, right? So you always have to bring in an example from your past experiences that, especially in the behavioral questions, that can help illustrate you in action. And the examples that you choose, so this is the preparatory work, right? The examples that you choose, some of them should demonstrate the collaborative mindset, the collaborative approach in how you solve problems. Obviously, problem solving is important. If everything works out according to plans, then, do you even need managers, right? This is about, your leadership potential demonstrated through how you solve problems, how you engage with others, how you influence decisions. All of that is a part of, of the examples that you choose to communicate your value to the admission team. In terms of particularly your behavior questions, where you're including examples, you should be structuring your responses using the STAR method. Initially, it's a little bit awkward because we don't think necessarily in this way, but the STAR method, which is the situation, task, action, result, is a really good way to organize your ideas in a way that you can answer a question in 2 minutes and give enough context for them to understand, what you are presenting. It shows that you have taken some action. And that there is obviously a result at the end of each example. There should be a result associated with it. Now, the only time I also, or the caveat that I give to applicants as they prepare, the STAR method applies really well across the board, with the exception of negative questions. Negative questions, I see them as like a time you failed, a time things didn't go according to plan. Then you need a reflection, an additional R at the end, which is the reflection. And what does this mean? Is that you need to demonstrate that you are someone who thinks, reflects on past experiences, and how can they learn, or how did you learn from that experience? So it's really important that you are able to differentiate the kinds of examples, and especially the ones where there is something that didn't go according to plan, whether that's a failure or things got derailed, that you have a reflection element to your responses. Some questions that you have to absolutely make sure that you have answers to. These are very common questions. Walk me through your resume is one of them, or a version of that is, tell me about yourself. Another version of that, tell me something that's not on your resume. That is sometimes asked. Why Booth? Why now? Obviously, if they go directly from walk me through your resume, you can't answer why Booth and why now without talking about your goals, because you are choosing to do business school or to go to business school because you have a professional aspiration and that needs to be integrated in there. But if they ask you short and long-term goals, you definitely want to make sure that you have those ready. If you did your, why Booth essay write up well, you should already have your goals pre-written. Don't change. So whatever those are, keep to what got you the interview, and make sure that you are comfortable talking about your goals. And remember that they can ask you, what alternative plans do you have if your goals don't pan out the way you have imagined them? Or what's an alternative plan if you don't get an MBA? Those are very common questions. Then we have obviously also behavior questions, because this is a conversation. And also remember that a conversation is just that. Depending on what you say, you can have follow-up questions that the interviewer may be curious about. So you need to be able to answer effectively across the board. Some of those questions are: tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership. Here, you want to make sure that you are a leader, or demonstrated leadership from the perspective of taking on something that was not your responsibility. Think of essentially the characteristics of a leader and how have you demonstrated that, especially for those of you who don't have a, quote unquote leadership title that you can rely on. The other question is: describe a time you faced a challenge and how did you handle it? Again, both of these behavior questions will require an example, and you're going to choose an example that demonstrates that there was a challenging decision to make. So you could go in one way or another. Sometimes both directions were not straightforward. How did you go about making your choice, making the decisions? So did you rely on data? Did you speak to mentors? Did you rely on other people? Did you pull in other people to support you in this process? So essentially kind of guide us through what your experience was like, and then what did you learn from that experience, right? So if you relied on mentors, how did mentorship influence your thinking in terms of how you solve other problems? If you relied on other people's expertise, how did the network, what value do you see in network as a result of this problem? So you really want to be introspective in terms of how you are choosing the examples, and also how you are thinking about the reflective part of your experience. And the other question that I often see is: how do you fit the Booth culture? This is you needing to know what the Booth culture is like. You do need to have conversations with students. You do want to make sure that you are speaking with individuals who are in your area of interest. So if you are interested in finance, make sure that you have conversations with those individuals who are in the finance club. If you're interested in energy and so on, as fintech, like any one of those areas, you want to have conversations with those individuals to get a sense of what the culture looks like, and then speak to how does that resonate with who you are in terms of how you're going to fit that culture. You should be seeing yourself as a Boothie, essentially. And, how do you communicate that from the past experiences that you have? If you recall, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that Booth, alumni are notorious for wanting to support the professional growth of the people that they supervise. How do you fit that culture? Or do you already embody the Booth personality traits, the cultural aspect of what makes a really successful Booth student? Do you embody that? And then how have you demonstrated that in the real world, in your own experiences? Remember that business schools are not looking for theory. They're looking for practical experiences and you in action. So using the STAR method will help you make sure that you are answering all parts of the questions. And sometimes, particularly if you are being if they ask you a lot of questions, sometimes this can be can throw you off. So having a structured response can definitely be helpful, and make sure that there is obviously repetition. I already gave you some of the tips here. So just as a recap, so be specific, provide concrete examples, one example per question, not multiple examples. Keep responses concise and relevant to Booth's values, and show strong alignment between your aspirations and Booth resources. This is especially related to your goals. I'm going to start with some do's and don'ts. So don't give generic answers, particularly to Booth. Booth wants the why and then another why on top of that, in terms of what decisions you make, how you make decisions, why were you thinking in those particular ways. That is the way that you impact the decision in Booth's interview invite, in terms of them seeing you as a potential Booth candidate or one who is going to find success there. It's really important that you do not rely, like there is an element of preparation. Make sure that you have enough repetitions, make sure that you have chosen the examples, make sure that you know your story in and out, but don't rely solely on the script. If the script is something that you need initially, that's fine. But towards the end, by the time you get to the interview, I strongly suggest that you rely on bullet points just as reminders or anchors to help guide your discussion, as opposed to relying on a word for word. The reason that is one, well, you're not going to sound natural, you're going to sound robotic. But also on top of that, the interviewer may ask you questions that are not structured exactly in the same way that you have responded in your document, which means that you will be thrown off, first and foremost. But second, you won't be able to rely on your preparatory work to answer the question, even though you have prepared the examples. So the best way is to look at a singular example and see all the different ways that that example can be used in different questions, and then tweak your opening and conclusions to match the question. Don't focus obviously only on achievements. Achievements are really important, but Booth also values the humility, potential growth. They value people who actually care about other people. So even though they're a quantitative school, they do actually care about people. So make sure that you are not just focused on, I help the business do this, and forget about your teammates, forget about your subordinates. You have to bridge the gap, or work on both elements of achievement, of course, from a business perspective, but also achievement from the perspective of your teammates. Engaging with the interviewer is really important. So don't think of your Booth interview as a interrogation, because it's not. Make it conversational. Make sure that they feel your warmth, they feel your personality, so that they can say yes to you. And some do's, obviously I mentioned already, do your research. I know you have done it already, but make sure you go through it again. Make sure you have a list of every person you've spoken to, every event that you have attended, some insights from those individuals as data points that you can rely on as you have a natural conversation with your interviewer. Practice behavior questions using real examples. You obviously want to showcase your leadership, your teamwork, your problem-solving skills that you bring to the table. And again, one question, one example. Showcase your interpersonal skills, right? I don't think I need to dive into deeper there. And that self-reflection. Booth is notorious for asking why. Why are you here, not somewhere else? Is one of a quote as you go downstairs to the classes in one of the Booth buildings, and that is, something that they value deeply. And I'm sure as you watched the information session, that was something that was brought up. Make sure that you embody that person who is thoughtful, thinking about all the decisions that you've made, and doing so, in a way that showcases that you are someone who is really thoughtful. You are a thoughtful leader. And then finally, make sure that you are preparing questions for the interviewer. It is a two-way street in the interview. So I know some of you forget that you are also interviewing the school in this process, and I want you to think that way. You are not so desperate that you want to attend Booth. Of course, you want to attend Booth, but you don't want to come across as such. You are also there to evaluate them, and you have an opportunity to interview the interviewer in terms of asking them questions. So if it's a student, make sure that it's students that the questions are appropriate for a student. This means, what was your experience like in the different areas that you're interested in, and make sure that there are questions that are thoughtful and not something you can easily find on the website. So this means you should prepare questions in advance. And the same thing with an alumnus. What would you want to learn about from someone who has graduated maybe a couple of years ago and has experienced the post MBA journey? What would you want to know from them that can help you make a final decision, assuming that you have multiple offers by the time you're done with your interviews? That's the mindset you want to go in with every interview for all the schools, because obviously that's a important element of engaging with other people, right? No one likes a desperate person, and so it's true also in the interview process. If you guys need support, one-on-one mock sessions, we do offer those at TIA Admissions. You can request a consultation for Booth or any other school that you're going through. We can set up a time to go through mocks. We will give you a set of questions that you will prepare in advance of the mock interview. And then we go through and help elevate your responses in a way that obviously supports your overall application to your target institution. All right, I'm going to stop sharing screens. I don't know how much time we have left, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them here. All right, let me just move my camera. Okay, are these actual questions that Booth is asking this time, and do we need to answer both or choose one of them? These are actual questions that they're asking for the 2024-2025 application cycle, and you have to choose. This is for the video, I'm assuming, and you have to choose one or the other and not both. And you have 2 weeks from the day of the interview invite to complete it and submit it to them. I do encourage that you write your responses. I encourage that you write some kind of guide for yourself as you record, but the recording should be, I don't know if you guys do reels or something like that, but it should be something along those lines. Excellent. Great question. So how long should I wait before sending a thank you note post-interview? I always advise applicants to send the thank you note the day of the interview or the latest within 24 hours of the interview. This is, at least in the United States, business etiquette that you have to do, unless the only time you don't do it is if the interviewer says you don't need to do it, then you can leave it or you don't have to submit it. But otherwise, they won't ask for one. It is expected that you will do it. And the thank you note should be really personal, meaning it should talk about something that you and the interviewer had a chance to speak through, or it could also capture something along the lines of, if you feel like you didn't answer fully one question, you can integrate your a better version of that into your email. So it's an opportunity for you to also correct yourself, especially if you feel like you didn't perform well. Excellent. All right. Any other questions? How can a candidate with 2 to 3 years of experience avoid being perceived as casual applicant by the MBA programs? I think I'm going to interpret that question to mean like, how do you sound more mature than, meaning how do you sound more like someone who has 4 to 5 years of work experience, as in the traditional age range? So I would say focus on your experiences and focus on your introspection. Um, so I'm here in the interview. So, given that we're talking about the interview, in the interview, make sure that you have examples that are strong examples that capture what your contributions have been, your involvement in projects, in the areas that you are involved in, but give enough detail and have reflections on those. Obviously, in the application, you approach it the same way, it's just in a written format, where you have a little bit more flexibility and more time to actually develop a cohesive narrative. But I would say, the way you elevate your experiences is to dive deeper into those experiences, to reflect on them, and showcase the maturity level that the business schools are expecting. That typically, with more years of work experience, you get to develop over time. This is more general questions rather than the booth per se, but how would you advise us to answer? Tell me about yourself. Should you answer it in a way like outside of my resume and give personality traits, or should we use your resume? Um, this is a great, great question that I spend quite a lot of time with clients to go through. So the way I like to answer the tell me about yourself question is actually to anchor it on a theme. And a theme is the way I focus that is to essentially make it a theme about something that is very um, evident or is sprinkled around the resume. So sometimes the theme can be someone who is really focused around inclusion, and sometimes the theme can be around creative endeavors. Sometimes the theme can be exposure to technology. It really depends on the person's experiences. But if you look at your resume as it stands, what I suggest that you do is look for the patterns of your personality that is woven into your resume, and then make that your theme. And once you have done that, typically I say your resume, walk me through your resume, tell me about yourself. You have about a 3-4 minute window to answer that question. And then once you've anchored your response on a theme, then you communicate how that theme has been um, prevalent throughout your career. So sometimes that starts with, in college, I did this, which led me to look for opportunities around, whatever your first job was. And that led me to the next phase. But always look at your story from the perspective of what were you looking to gain as you moved in your career, and communicate the proverbial white space on your resume, and not a read through of what's on your resume, because again, you have to assume that the interviewer has read your resume. They see what's on the page. Here is an opportunity for you to give them the backstory around your decision making process, and the theme is really a great way to do that seamlessly. That kind of captures your entire experiences in sort of like in a nice box. Although we try not to be in a box. So I have a relatively low quant score on my GMAT. Since you mentioned Booth is a quant heavy school, is there anything I can do at this stage to demonstrate quant abilities? At this stage, I mean, we should be anticipating interview invites any day. And at this stage, they probably have made a decision on sort of like what they're going to do. However, a way to increase your quant, especially if you're put on the wait list, is to take a class. Well, first and foremost, maybe try retaking the GMAT. But if you've exhausted that, look at enrolling in a class like Harvard Business School's core. That's the most sort of prestigious of all the classes that you can enroll in terms of the value that they bring to the MBA candidates profile. However, that one is 12 to 17 week, depending on which class you enroll in. And it requires about, I think, 10 to 12 hours of study time per week. You need to pass You need to enroll in the class, take all the modules, and pass the exam at the end in order to get that certificate. An alternative to that is Berkeley's extension school has a math for management course. I forget how long that one is, but it's still a couple of weeks for sure of work that you need to go through. And I think it's 45 days, if I'm not mistaken. And you go through the modules there. You also pass an exam at the end of the process, and you get a certificate, and that certificate can be used to demonstrate your quantitative readiness, essentially. At this point, though, I would say only do this if it's waitlisted, or if you're planning, like depending on kind of how the full application cycle turns out for you. If you're planning to reapply, then obviously you'll have to do this all over again. Excellent. All right, I think, do we have time for one more question? Okay, let's go with one more question. So if some questions caught us by surprise, is it okay to collect our thoughts by using a pen to write short bullet points and then answer? No, not to write short. I would say a trick that I advise clients to use when they need a little bit of time to collect their thoughts is have a glass of water next to you. When they ask you the tough question that you did not prepare, grab the water, drink while you think what you want to say, and then answer your questions. But not, but don't try to write bullet points, because that kind of makes the experience a little bit awkward. However, I would say one of the practical advice that I can give in terms of your preparation process is go through. I mean, there's quite a few. I know GMAT Club has interview experiences from past applicants. Look through those questions in terms of what questions can arise, and then try to have a lot of examples that you can rely on. And then at the end, sometimes you just answer based on what comes to mind, because you don't have a lot of time to reflect. But I would say you want to have about I would say close to 10 examples that you have sort of in your repository that can answer many different questions. This way, even if it's a question that you haven't actually prepared for, you can look at your roster of examples and see which one can you use to answer that question. But this happens with time, so you can't prepare for this in a couple of days. You need time to actually go through those examples, come up with examples, go through the questions, come up with examples, and then once you have that, then you need to be able to say, okay, so what questions can this example answer? And how would I tweak my responses based on the question for this, in using this example? So this really does need time. So if you're going through this process, and know that you'll have about 2 to 3 weeks once they are invited to interview to actually complete your interview. Starting early, this process will help you with that component. The only way you get better is by practice. Excellent. Okay, I think we're done. There's no more questions. I will be doing mocks, so please join me in the mock, especially if you have walk me through your resume examples and see if you can integrate my commentary into your approach. I may ask one of those questions. So I will be doing the mocks not immediately after this, but it will be at 1:15 Eastern time. So please join me in that session. And I'll be glad to ask you some questions and help you elevate your responses in a way that when the interview invites come in, you have some good solid stories that you can use and leverage to answer both questions. Thank you again for wonderful questions and for being here live, and I look forward to seeing you shortly.